for today's tutorial, I'm going to be using two colors. They are both a weight for acrylic yarn, both from Big Twist. You can use whatever yarn that you'd like. It doesn't change anything. You can use as many colors, you can use more, less, whatever. I'm going to be using two for this one. We're going to be using a 6mm crochet hook, some scissors, and then a needle to weave in our ends. We're going to start with this. Okay, so we are going to start at the neck line and work our way down. So to do that, we're going to start by making a chain. This chain needs to be an even number. So we are going to chain 76. Okay, so I made my chain of 76. Now, once you've made your chain, hold your ends together and make sure that this fits over your head. If it is not, if you need it bigger or if you need it smaller, you will just make sure your chain is an even number and it needs to be divisible by 4. So I did 76. Okay, divide that by 4 and you get 19. Now if you decide to do 78, 78 divided by 4 is going to get you 19.5. Okay, so that's not going to work because we don't have a 0.5. We don't have half of a stitch. So you go up to your nearest, I would round up rather than down. So if you need to go up, you can do 80. And that's going to get you 20 or so on. Just make sure that your number is divisible by 4. And that's because we have 4 corners and we need all 4 of our edges to be the same, to have the same amount so that it's not crooked. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Just make sure your number is divisible by 4. So for me, that number was 76. Once you've reached your chain, you're going to make sure that your chain is not twisted and bring your edges together. Okay, make sure it's not twisted anywhere. And then we are going to slip stitch into that very first stitch. And this is going to create a circle. This is creating our neck hole. Okay, now we're going to move on to row 1. We are going to start by making a chain. And then we're going to be using half double crochets. So place a half double crochet into that same stitch that you slip stitched into. So that very first stitch, place a half double crochet. Okay, and then we're going to place a half double crochet into every stitch around. Okay, so half double crochet is going to be a yarn over. Insert your hook, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3. Okay, yarn over, insert your hook, pull through all 3. Okay, so that's what we're going to do for round 1. We're going to place half double crochets into every stitch around. I'm going to go ahead and do that. You should have as many half double crochets as you had as your beginning chain. So I had 76, so I will have 76 half double crochets around. Okay, I'm going to continue that, and then I will meet you when we are back here at our very first chain space. Okay, so here we are. I am placing my last half double crochet, and then we have finished row 1. Again, make sure that your neckline is not twisted. Okay, and then we are going to place a slip stitch into that very first half double crochet. Okay, so slip stitch into that first half double crochet of the round. And then it should look like this. And this is row 1. Okay, for row 2, we're going to chain 1. And again, place 1 half double crochet into that same stitch that we slip stitched into. and place a half double crochet. And then we are going to go around again, placing half double crochets into every stitch. Okay, so same as before, we're just going to place half double crochets into every stitch around. Okay, so I'm going to continue to do that. And then again, once I get back to the end of row 2, I'm in that very last stitch. I'll meet you there. We're actually going to do this for a total of 3 rounds. Right now we are working on round 2. Okay, again, half double crochets into every stitch, and I'll meet you at the end. Okay, I just finished my last stitch of round 2. Again, we're going to slip stitch into that first half double crochet of the previous round. And then we're going to do 1 more row of half double crochets. So again, chain 1, half double crochet into that very first stitch, and then half double crochet all the way around. This will be our last row. So 3 rows total of our half double crochets. Okay, so I'm just going to do this really quick, and then we'll move on. Okay, so we're at the end of our round 3. We're going to slip stitch into that first half double crochet. Okay, now we're going to start shaping our actual poncho. So we're going to go into our granny stitches. Before we do that, I do want to explain how you will split up your poncho. So as we mentioned before, your number needed to be divisible by 4. So I had the 76 stitches divided by 4, and that gave me 19. Okay, so whatever your number is, we are going to count from this first space, our first chain. So each direction we're going to count that number. So mine's 19. So I'm going to go from here and go over 19 stitches and place a stitch marker. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 19. Okay, so I place my stitch marker in the 19th stitch. Now going the other direction, again, your first stitch being, or your first space being 1, the same as counting this way, but we're going this way, okay? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 19. Okay, we're gonna place a stitch marker there. Okay, so go both directions and count your number that was your number of stitches divided by 4. Okay, this is where our points are going to go when we start creating the poncho. So where we are starting is our shoulder now. Okay, if that makes sense. Our point is going to be this way, and it should be even. Okay. Hope that makes sense. If it does not, it will in a minute, I promise. Okay, so now we are going to start our clusters. We're going to start with a chain of 3. 1, 2, 3. And then into that same space, we're going to place 2 double crochets. So yarn over. We're going to insert our hook into that very first stitch. Pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, pull through 2. Okay, now we're going to place 1 more. So yarn over, insert your hook, pull through 2, pull through 2. Okay, so that's going to count as our first cluster. So we have a chain 3 and then 2 more double crochets, creating our first cluster. Okay, now we're going to skip 2 stitches, 1, 2. And into that third stitch, we're going to create a cluster by placing 3 double crochets. Okay, so 3 double crochets all into the same stitch. It should look like this. Okay, now we're going to continue that. We're going to skip 2 stitches, place 3 double crochets into that third space, 2, 3. Okay, so this is pretty much going to be our pattern. We're going to skip 2 stitches, place a cluster into the third, and each cluster is going to be 3 double crochets. Okay, so we're just going to continue this until we get to our stitch marker. So skip 2 stitches, place a cluster into the third stitch, skip 2. Okay, and then now we are coming up on our stitch marker. So once you get here, you should have 2 spaces. You should have 2 spaces left and then your stitch marker. So we're going to take out our stitch marker. And then into the space where our stitch marker was, which again should be 2 spaces, then that space, we're going to place a cluster. So 3 double crochets. Okay, and then we are going to chain 2, and place 3 more double crochets into that same space. Okay, so this is going to create the point of our poncho. This is going to create the triangle. Okay, now you can place your stitch marker back if you like. Okay, so every time we get to our stitch marker, we're going to create a triangle by doing 1 cluster, 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 more double crochets. Now we're going to continue like normal. We're going to skip 2 stitches, place 3 double crochets into the third, okay, skip 2 stitches, place 3 double crochets, and then now we're going to continue to repeat this, the skip 2, place a cluster, skip 2, place a cluster. We're going to repeat that all the way until we get to our other stitch marker. Okay, so I'm going to do that really quick. I'll meet you back when we get to our other stitch marker. Okay, so now we are at our next stitch marker, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to place a cluster, so 3 double crochets, we're going to chain 2, and then place 3 more double crochets into that same stitch. Okay, so now we have our other corner or triangle shape. Okay, now we're going to continue the pattern until we get to where we started. So we're going to place, skip 2 stitches, place a cluster. Okay, skip 2, place a cluster. I'm going to do that all the way until the end of the row, and then once we get there, I will show you guys what to do. Okay, so here I am. I'm at the end. You should have 2 stitches left. We're going to skip over those, and we are going to slip stitch into the third chain of our chain 3 from the beginning. So slip stitch into that third chain, and now we finished row 1 of our clusters. Now to start row 2, we're going to chain 3, okay, and then for this row we're not going to place our cluster in this same space. We're going to skip a cluster and place our cluster here. So 3 double crochets, Okay, so we have our chain 3, we skipped our cluster, and then we placed our next cluster here. So the reason we did that is because if we continued, we're actually going to alternate. So every even row, we're going to do this. We'll have our chain 3, we will skip a cluster, place our cluster. Okay, every odd row, we will have our chain 3, and then into that same space, we will place 2 more double crochets to create a cluster. Okay, so I know it's a little confusing. After a couple rows, you will get the hang of it. But the reason we are doing that is because if we continued to chain 3 and place our first cluster into that first space, each row we are going to be adding a cluster that way. And that's going to make it uneven. One side is going to have way too many clusters and it's not going to look right. Okay, so just remember, every odd row we'll chain 3, place 2 double crochets, and then continue our pattern. Every even row we'll chain 3, skip a cluster, place our cluster, and continue our pattern. I'll show it one more time. And then I will let you guys go on. So now we're going to continue our pattern like normal, placing a cluster in every space. So 1 cluster in every space, and then when we come to our corner, we are going to make our corner again. So every time we come up to that corner, we will place a cluster, chain 2, place another cluster, all in the same stitch. And we will do that every row, every time we get to that corner space. Okay, so here we are. We're going to place 3 double crochets. Chain 2, 1, 2, and place 3 more double crochets back into that same stitch. Okay, so we're just going to continue that all the way around. I'm going to finish off this row and then I'll meet you guys back at the beginning and show you how we'll end our rows with our chain 3 here. Okay, so I'm at the end of my row. I'm going to place my last cluster here. So what we're going to do on our even rows, the one where we had our chain 3 and then we skipped a cluster, we're going to place 2 double crochets into that last space. So we're not going to place 3, we're going to place 2, because now we're going to slip stitch into that 3rd chain of the chain 3. Okay, and that makes a cluster. So it ends with a chain or 2 double crochets in our chain being that last cluster. Okay, we're going to do that at the end of every even row. So we're just going to alternate. So this round is going to be, we're going to start with the chain 3. And this is round 3 that we're starting. So we chain 3, and in that same first space, we're going to place 2 double crochets. Okay, so now this is going to be the same as our first row. We're going to continue our pattern all the way around, slip stitch into our 3rd chain, and then the next round we'll chain 3, skip our cluster, place our cluster. Okay, and then our pattern continues. We place a cluster in every space, and in every corner space we place a cluster, chain 2, another cluster into that, creating our triangle. Okay, so at this point, it's pretty repetitive. I'm going to do a couple rows, and then I will show you guys how it's looking, and then we'll continue to the end, and then we will add the fringe. Okay, so I have done a couple rows. I've done 14 rows so far, and this is how it's looking. So you should notice it is turning into a triangle. It's creating our poncho. Okay, so that's 14 cluster rows. I'm going to continue until I have 34 rows. Once I get there, I'll meet you back. If you can do the same, you can also try it on, decide if you want it longer, shorter, and continue as you go. But I always do 34 rows, and that fits perfect for me. So I'm going to go ahead and continue that, and then I'll see you guys again once we are there. Okay, so here we are. I'm at the end of my 34th row. I'm going to slip stitch into the chain 3 space, and then chain 1, and then we're going to cut our yarn. Okay, so we're going to fasten off. Okay, and then it's kind of hard for me to get this in here, but now the poncho is complete. Okay, now we're going to start adding our fringe. So I'm going to put this aside. So what I do, and you don't have to, but I get an object. I usually use a phone case because it's easiest for me. And then I take my yarn. You can use any object as well. I take my yarn and I just wrap it around. Okay, I don't even count. I just keep going. Okay, so after I wrapped it around a couple times, I'm going to cut my yarn. Okay, and then that's how I'm going to get my fringe. Okay. I'm going to be using 2 colors. And then how I add my fringe, let's get our poncho. Okay, so I always start at the front corner, or the point down here. And I always use 3 strands. So in this case, I'm using 2 colors. So I'm going to use 3 of my red, 3 of my pink. Okay. I'm going to grab them all and fold it in half. Then you can take your hook, insert it through the space, pull your yarn through, and then take your remaining yarn, pull it through that loop, and pull tight. Okay, if you want to add, if you want more fuller fringe, more fringe, you can do more. I do always use 3 or 6 strands total. And then I'm going to attach it. You can attach it in every space if you'd like. I do attach it in one, skip a space, and then attach it into the next. So I'm going to attach my fringe into every other space. Okay, and then I'm just going to continue this all the way around, attaching fringe, skipping a space, all the way around. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then some of mine is not straight. I do cut mine at the end to make sure everything's even. But for now, I'm going to go around and attach my fringe, and then I'll meet you back there. Okay, this is what our poncho should look like. I did steam mine and cut my fringe so that it lays the way that I would like. I hope this tutorial was helpful. Don't forget to subscribe. Bye!